Hello and welcome to the Book Show on Diversity Television. I'm Ava Colopy, a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. My work primarily focuses on the lived experience of social issues. We are in Ireland, the land of literature, higher education, and debate, and the best damn pubs out there. So today I'm going to talk about our focus on the West. We in the West, we focus on the West. This is limiting. So we have a habit of focusing on Western Europe and the sort of former British Commonwealth countries such as the United States, Canada, and Australia. We hardly even focus on South Africa or Nigeria, which are English-speaking countries that were colonized by the British, or primarily by the British. When I was an English language teacher just recently for 2.5 years teaching English to adult speakers of other languages, I was forever trying to find my students materials on the other English-speaking countries. For example, maybe a speech by Chimamanda Adichie or anything like that, something from Nigeria, something from South Africa, some Canadian TV shows, something to show them the rest of the English-speaking world. English language course books usually focus on England and the United States to the exclusion of the rest of the English-speaking world, in spite of the fact that many of my students were very interested in going to Canada, a pretty safe, friendly, and very successful country. And I have been there, and they are very nice. It was a very nice time. So today I'm going to talk about a book called The Rise of the BRICS. The Geopolitics of South-South Relations by Pádraig Carmody. That, by the way, is the Irish for Patrick. Because, of course, when the English were here in Ireland, they anglicized everything and forced my ancestors to stop speaking the native Irish language. So even my name, Colopy, was originally Ní Chopa for girls and Ó Culpa for boys. So that is the original form of that name. So the BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it talks about the geopolitics and the economies and the relations between these countries throughout that huge region known as Sub-Saharan Africa. The book is a very kind of quick and handy way to start educating ourselves on the rest of the world because geographically, more of the world is non-Western than is Western, which is very important to remember and to not be too egocentric and not end up being painfully ignorant of the rest of the world. So it's only about 140 pages. As you see, it's not a terribly long book, and it's a great way to just get yourself introduced to this. So I'll read you the description of the book from the back cover because it's a good way to introduce it, and then I will give you an example by reading a short excerpt. So a little over a decade ago, Africa was being spoken of in the media as the lost or hopeless continent. Now it has some of the fastest growing economies in the world, largely because of the impacts of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In the first book, to be written about the BRICS as a collective phenomenon, Pádraig Carmody reveals how their engagement with Africa, both individually and collectively, generates both new inequalities and potential for development. Crucially, Carmody shows how the emergence of these economies has begun to alter the very nature of globalization, which is no longer purely a Western-led project. This is a path-breaking examination of Africa's changing role in the world. And actually, in more recent times, I have seen some of the programs. This is from 2013. Just in the past year, I've seen some of the programs called In Business Africa through, I believe, the BBC. And it's showing a lot of startups in Africa and a lot of the small businesses that are growing in Africa. So we in the West are going to need to, in a lot of ways, change our narrative about Sub-Saharan Africa because a lot of it is becoming quite successful. So good for them. Because I just feel better when everyone's being successful. Not any one group more than any other. It's better when just have all the success spread around. So a short excerpt. In the 1960s and 1970s, some scholars wrote about the dependence of the Third World on the industrial countries, However, as energy resources have become more in demand and scarce, with the expansion of the global economy, a new type of reverse dependence or interdependence has emerged. While the search for new energy sources has been one of the primary drivers of increased Chinese, Indian, and Brazilian engagement in Africa, Russia is the world's biggest exporter of energy. The country has more than a third of the world's proven gas reserves and almost 5% of its oil, and in some years exports more than Saudi Arabia. Consequently, its re-engagement with the continent has been much more limited than that of the other members of the BRICS group. For example, Russo-African trade peaked at USD 7.3 billion in 2008, a small fraction of China's trade with the continent. Furthermore, while Russia's imports from Africa have been growing at a compound annual rate of 19% for the last decade or so, the continent still accounts for only 1% of Russia's global trade and about 4% of the stock of Russian overseas foreign direct investment. So it might sound a bit dense or it might not, depending on what your background is and what you normally read. Like I said, it's 140 pages. It's a good introduction to the subject of looking into the non-Western part of the world and the dynamics of that. And though it doesn't seem to cover it in this book, it's something to think about then how that affects us in the West, how it affects our position in the world. Are we going to continue to be more kind of the big authority figure, or are we going to have a more equal relationship with these other countries and these other regions? So something to think about and a good introduction into the subject. So I seriously hope that you'll consider reading this book and empowering yourself with education. So thank you for watching The Book Show on Diversity Television. I'm Ava Colopy here in Ireland, and I hope that you will join us again next time for more books and opinions. And to all of our viewers out there, I hope you find what you're looking for.